The Times is reporting that Russia has intensified its offensive in the east of Ukraine. The Kremlin is thought to be desperate to capture new territory before President Putin secures a new 6-year term of office at the presidential elections. They're due in March. To talk me through the latest in the conflict, I'm joined by Russia watcher Alan Mendoza. He's executive director of the Henry Jackson Society. Good evening, Alan.
Hello, Kate.
Let's talk about conscription and about, strategy in terms of boots on the ground for both countries. Is this becoming an issue of who has the greater numbers in what might define the war as we go into winter? Is it about bulk or is it about strategy?
Well, it's probably about both, because the strategy has to be there, of course. You can have as many people as you want, but if there's no strategy behind them, then they're liable to get sort of turned over on the battlefield, as it were. But you do have to have the numbers of people who are willing and able to fight and are going to be rested and able to fight to their best capabilities. And I think, seeing as the war is heading towards its third year now, slowly and inexorably to that point, it's no surprise that you're seeing a bit of, kind of exhaustion on both sides from the prospect of that continuing and no real quick and easy way to bring it to a resolution. So, as in many cases, wars do often end up being battles of endurance. And the question is, which of these countries now has the greater endurance, who can survive for the longer term?
So two perspectives here, two different approaches from each country. Russia is reportedly pouring troops into battle in East Ukraine with little regard for casualties. Putin has doubled down on his spending and the amount that he's proposing, that he's dedicating to the war, is a third of Russia's entire national budget. So with all the economic constraints going on in the country, he's chosen to put forward, I think it's something like 96 billion. It's a huge amount of money and resource into this war. And on the other side, Ukraine are starting to signal their concern that some of the weaponry promised by Europe and by other ally countries is not arriving quickly enough.
Yes, I mean, that is the case, isn't it? You've got a situation here that the Russians are happy to spend as much as possible and to frankly lose as many people as possible in their bid, I suppose, to bleed the Ukrainians. That's clearly their goal. It's very cynical as a policy, but it relates to, for example, what the German army tried to do to the French army with some success in Verdun in the First World War, and they just drew out French casualties as much as possible, not caring for their own side, because they reckoned they could topple the French army on a morale basis. So it could well be the case that that's what Putin is aspiring to do, but he's taking a terrible toll here. I mean, that's a hugely expensive policy to be following. And then you start to wonder whether there will be a reaction in Russia if body bags continue to return, if the economy continues to stutter, and people go, what are we wasting this money on just our children being killed at the front line? So he's got a problem there. The Ukrainians need the kit as much as the men. In a sense, they need, as much material as possible to be able to punch through the Russian lines. And if they feel that there is a fatigue setting in from the West on this also cannot be a productive moment for Kiev's sort of response to this as well, because if you start having the lines of weapons grow thin, you have nothing to put in the field, and that creates your own problem.
Yeah, let's talk about Ukraine and their conscription policy, which we understand is set to change. So they're going to take a slightly different approach to keeping their fighting capacity at a good level.
Yes, I think it's quite sensible. What the Ukrainians are now doing is basically not saying to everyone, right, you're going to the front. They're looking now on a skills-based setting to say, right, actually, your skills might be better in logistics, your skills might be better in intelligence, your skills might be better for a role, in observation field or in health or whatever it might be, as opposed to being a frontline fighter. And I think they're doing this because there's a growing reluctance among some people to sort of volunteer for what they regard as a very difficult assignment, obviously. And also they do need to do some rotation of their troops. You can't have the same troops fighting year on year on year. So I think they've wised up to the idea that in 2023, you don't fight wars as in a First World War capacity when you just throw them in on the front lines. There are other ways that you can fight, and there are other smarter ways that you can achieve a victory or a breakthrough, and then utilize more people in doing it.
And the east of Ukraine is still a hugely important area strategically for both Ukraine and also Russia, who will be, trying to make dents into that area, particularly with those presidential elections in mind. What are we likely to see as we approach Christmas in terms of war strategy? How does this war see through the winter, Alan, from your judgment?
Well, unfortunately, it's likely to be, much of stalemate. The terrain is not good terrain to fight in winter. It's mainly going to be skirmishing here and there. And I presume preparations, everyone working out what we're going to be doing in springtime when the ground is better for offensives or counteroffensives in this sort of way. So, I think, realistically, you can't expect much movement in the middle of winter, given how difficult the conditions will be on those front lines. But there might be other areas that people think they can work through. There can be some, sort of destruction of infrastructure on the Ukrainian side. The Russians will try and do their best to make, winter a miserable process there. The Ukrainians, increasingly with better weaponry, can make the front line quite a miserable place for the Russians as well. So I think in a sense it falls into, doesn't it, that whole war of attrition idea that we're seeing who will emerge in spring with more pep in their step, as it were.